Now, let's dive deep into this big LGBTQ story for today. I'm Alex Morash, and let's queer up trans rights. It's now official. Donald Trump and America bans transgender athletes. President Donald Trump signed an executive order Wednesday restricting transgender participation in women's sports, fulfilling a campaign threat and escalating his broader rollback of LGBTQ rights. Titled "No Men in Women's Sports," the order directs immediate enforcement against schools and athletic associations, despite executive orders not being laws. The administration expects the NCAA to change its policies accordingly. LGBTQ advocates, including the Human Rights Campaign's president, Kelley, condemned the order, saying, quote, "We all want sports to be fair, students to be safe, and young people to have the opportunity to participate alongside their peers. But an attempted blanket ban deprives kids of those things," end quote. According to legal experts, swift challenges as executive orders cannot override civil rights protections without congressional approval. Critics point out that Trump is actually legislating through executive order, which may not be even constitutionally legal. But because of GOP's control of both the House and Senate, the process of legal lawsuits in the court is a slow process to rebuke Trump's executive orders like this one. But one thing is very clear. The fight for inclusion and fairness in sports is far from over. You know, at Options, I used to have to write about the different anti-trans bills dealing with sports. And I would always try to remind viewers that, you know, when they're trying to talk about trans sports, it's because they are trying to dodge what's actually happening in the trans experience. They don't want to talk about trans murders. They don't want to talk about the poverty rates. They don't want to talk about what trans people are going through. But at the same time, they're also trying to prey on people's ideas of fairness. But when you actually spend just 2 seconds to look at sports inclusion, gender has almost nothing to do with who should be going against who in sports. And this sort of vile stuff they've been doing for years. And it just drives me crazy. You know, groups like the Alliance Defending Freedom helped write Project 2025. Right. And they went all after trans kids. And they've been doing it for years. I once wrote in The Advocate about how they would go after trans kindergartners, 6-year-olds, because they know that they would be easy targets because most political groups wouldn't go and try and defend those kids. So this has always disgusts me, and whenever I see this, it makes my blood boil, quite frankly.
Makes my blood boil. I teach sometimes at Barry University. It's through the sports department, sports management, and I talk to the college students, the graduate students. We talk about this issue all the time. It's encouraging to me that most of the younger people, 99% of the younger people are like, what is the big deal? Like, but for the President of the United States, with all the things that a President of the United States has to do, to spend so much time and energy on the trans community, on trying to figure out different ways to harm people of the trans experience is just blowing my mind. Before we came here today, I was looking up some numbers. There are 12 NCAA trans athletes right now. 12. So that executive order is to affect 12 people. How does anyone who runs any type of organization have time to go out of their way to figure out how to harm 12 people?
It just shows.
Not with the correct information, not with correct science, not with just to hurt people. It blows my mind. It blows my mind.
I mean, it just shows you that when you talk about, like you said, 12 people, and of all of the millions and millions of people there are, and the very select amount of trans children that make up less than 1% of the population, that you're so concerned about that. There isn't even any discrepancies where trans children are just winning all of these awards and trophies and things over just regular kids.
Yeah. It's never happened. They've been playing.
It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous conversation.
They've been playing in sports in the state of Florida for more than 10 years. Nobody knew. The politicians have made it a hot button issue, but there was never a complaint. Nobody's lost out on a scholarship. Nobody's kid didn't get an award. Like, it hasn't affected anything. Just more kids had the opportunity to play.
These bans also affect cis kids. You know, in Rhode Island, where Options, that bill that they fortunately didn't go very far with, it was written to allow schools to check students' internal and external sex organs.
Yeah.
By the way, Rhode Island at the same time had just had to arrest a coach for doing naked fat checks of his boy. So I was like, what the heck are you all doing? And we've been seeing something similar has been happening in other states where they're trying to force girls to prove if they're girls or not. I'm like, anti-trans sports stuff is really just attempts for cis men to try and go after young women. And we need to talk about it like that too more.
When I was a tennis player, when I was in school, when I was in high school, I was a tennis player. There was a brother and sister from another school that were very, very good. The sister was so good that they let her play on the boys' team. And she played number 1 on the boys' team. And she went undefeated and beat all the other boys, right? She played singles and tennis. Not one piece. Nobody complained. Nobody said, oh, it's not fair. Nobody said anything. She just happened to be good. Like the examples that they try to pull out of nowhere, they don't make any sense. Last year they tried to talk about the swimmer. That swimmer was not the number 1 swimmer on the college team for Penn State. She just happened to win one swimming meet, but she was like number 9th on the team. She wasn't the best. It's like you're making up stories that don't matter. How do you have... I don't understand. Outside of just trying to feed that hate to people who feed off of hate, like I don't understand this whole thing at all.
Well, I'm sorry, no, after you.
No, go ahead.
It's a play out of the Jim Crow playbook. They're playing on people's ignorance and their fear. During Jim Crow times, there was the myth of the black man that wanted to go after the white woman, and it was playing on the fear around sexual assault, around violence against the vulnerable white woman. It's the same playbook they're using for their attacks on trans bathroom bans. This false myth fear of trans people wanting to go into a bathroom to prey on women or prey on children, and we have to protect them. It's no different than this ban, right? What they're trying to do right now. It's
using the hatred to try to control their base.
Trying to control their base, but also trying to create the permission structure for violence against a marginalized community.
Yeah.
The whole myth of a black man going after a white woman during Jim Crow was the underpinning for allowing lynchings and a lot of violence. That's exactly what they're trying to do right now. They're trying to demonize and villainize the trans community.
And I truly believe that people fear what they don't understand.
Amen.
There's so many people that are dealing and seeing and working with trans people every single day, and they have no idea that they already know someone that's trans. And I think that all of this LGBTQ legislation specifically geared toward the transgender community is trying to put us back in a box somewhere. I think for a long time we were able to be that little dirty secret that was swept under the rug somewhere. But when you go back to, I guess, 2008 or when you first started seeing people like Laverne Cox out, there are so many trans people that are out there prospering in politics and entertainment and teachers and firemen and lawyers and all type of men. And I think that it scares people.
It scares people because they keep pushing these false narratives to scare people. It wouldn't scare people if you educated people instead. Like we could do this same thing a totally different way and make it inclusive and make it about love and make it about acceptance and make it about learning more about a person instead of just hating people that you don't even know.
But the question is, do they want to be educated? You keep saying we can educate them, but do they really want to be educated, or do they want to stay in their small little box?
Well, they're getting educated now. They're just getting incorrect information. I mean, they're getting information one way or the other, but what are you receiving? And like, what kind of person is it making you? Is it making you a better person when your little kid decides that they want to come to you and talk about possibility of being trans? Do you want to be the parent that can talk to your child, that can understand, that can know where to go for resources, that can know where to go for help, that's open to conversation? Or do you want to be the parent that rejects your child? Do you want to be that parent? I don't understand.
I can't speak for all parents of trans kids, but when I would do that research of the different times that ADF would target trans kids, the parents, when they would speak in front of school meetings or to reports, it was always, they just were trying to help their child
Right.
succeed,
Right.
and they couldn't. And the idea of these institutions trying to come and attack their child. So I put more faith in parents than that, but maybe it's unfounded. It's more, as you were alluding earlier, and they're trying to dehumanize trans people because if you actually talk about the trans experience, it's not a weird, bizarre conversation that the right's trying to make it. It's the actual human stories.
It's just like
And if I could leave on one other thing also, they're not all LGBT people are facing an unusual threat right now.
Mm-hmm.
Lesbian, gays, bisexuals, but in particular the transgender community. And we can't treat the attacks that are happening on the rest of us the same as the level of vitriol that is going after the trans community.
It's amazing.
And they're trying to divide us. Look at what the State Department did. The State Department took the transgender, intersex, and asexual off of the website, but left lesbian, gay, and bisexual.
Yeah.
It is to create a division among us. To say, well, if we don't defend the trans community, maybe the rest of us are going to be safe, and we cannot fall.
We can never, ever do anything like that. That's just terrific.
Remember, if they'll come for one, they'll come for all.
Amen.
Absolutely.
That is a big LGBTQ story for today. There is no other queer nonprofit media platform like this in the entire country. Support our LGBTQ stories by subscribing and sharing Queer News Tonight.